Today we're kicking off the Genesis Ag podcast, and it was my great honor and privilege to be brought to Humboldt, Tennessee to help introduce people who may not know Josh and Phillip Davis to them. Let everybody know the people that I know so that hopefully we can help start building relationships and help educate and help drive agriculture forward. These guys have been a big part of the agricultural industry for 15 years, 20 years, something at least. I've been working with these guys and aware of them for at least 10 years. It feels like some days it feels a lot longer than others. But it's my job today to try to get everyone to know Phillip and Josh the same way that I do. Please stay tuned. Well, Phillip, a lot of people don't know you. A lot of people do know you. A lot of people who people know you. For the people who don't know, either the people who know you or the people who don't know you, tell us a little bit about you. Let us get to know you.
So I guess my story started on a family farm in North Carolina. Got into research really with animals, beginning at 14 years of age. Started doing trial feeds, everything on young pigs. That really kind of whet my appetite for research. And then we got into growing crops more so, and it just kind of started off from there on that family farm in North Carolina.
It's amazing that you could start from the two opposite ends of agriculture, starting with animals and winding up on crop production, but they really are intertwined.
They are, Mike, surprisingly close.
And that is going to be an interesting segue for a question I have at the end of the show. Stay tuned to that. That's going to be a little bit of a spoiler. And Josh, what about you? I mean, obviously you grew up with this man. What a tremendous honor for most people, but for you, I'm sure he's just dad. The family dynamic that you guys have is not a lot different from most of the ag world, but for a lot of people, it may be a little different. Can you explain what it's like growing up with the Phillip Davis?
Well, a lot of travel for sure when I was a kid, doing different things, but really being able to drive a tractor as a kid was always kind of fun. You could never keep the road straight down the road because we never had the privilege of having auto steer, RTK, anything on ours. So I remember one of the first times my dad brought a plow back where we had just rented a hay pasture. We were going to plant corn on it, and it looked like a snake going down the road where I'd tried to run an old 4-bottom plow. I think it was a 140. Couldn't keep it straight. And he'd be like, you got to keep it straight. And it just wouldn't be straight. So definitely one of the cool experiences. And then, a lot of the things that he did in the 80s and 90s, growing high-yielding soybeans, high-yielding corn in the state of North Carolina, it was like, well, this is pretty cool too. So I was fortunate enough to do a couple decent numbers back in the day. I guess we've not farmed, and this will be the 4th season that we've not farmed. So just some dynamic changed where we grew up farming at, and just wasn't really an opportunity there anymore. So, and that was in Western North Carolina. Now we're here, Humboldt, Tennessee, and picked up a couple farms. So the opportunity might be there in the future, but who knows?
Well, was that just normal for you growing up, raising high-yield stuff and placing in state contests? That's not a normal experience, I got to tell you.
That was just playing off of some of the successes that he had. Pretty interesting. One of my favorite things was probably since the mid-2000s, and I think they got out of hogs, my dad and my grandpa out of hogs in 88 or 89. We had not applied any commercial fertilizer on the farm. Yet our soil test numbers from the way he had treated the farm didn't reflect that. So we, especially on the home farm there in front of where my grandpa's house was at, we could always do something pretty cool there, and had several spots that were over 300 bushel corn. And this was rolling red clay, non-irrigated, and also did some pretty impressive soybean numbers the last few years that we farmed. And it, the way that we did it was a different mentality. It wasn't just put fertilizer out and have an expectation for yield. So you do something that nobody else is doing, and that's what's pretty cool about it. And then also I feel like the big advantage we had, especially 10, 15 years ago, is we weren't afraid to mess up. That's where we learn the most, is where we mess up. And then being able to take the experiences that we had to other farms. And I think that's where a lot of my dad's past success with state records or even world records came from. And then, you take your efficiency scores on fertility and really help a guy improve, where he can cut some costs out of the budget and increase profit and also increase yield. That's pretty cool.
That's always a good deal anytime you can help people out.
Yeah.
Now, when you were doing that, Phillip, were you trying to do that, or was it an accident by raising these high yields on pig manure?
Well, I've had some accidents with that. Yes, Mike. We over application. It's like that. Everybody wants to refer to the moron theory. You just put more on, and I soon found out that that's not really conducive of high yields, because you can overdo things, and that's one of the things that I guess that I'm excited about with Genesis, is working with nature and not really working against it. And so some of the things I did with excessive applications of fertility, I was really working against nature. And in my mindset at that time, well, I'll put more on and increase more yield. In fact, I went to a university and asked some of the top consultants, and we had the highest corn yield at that time. I had just won North Carolina soybean yield contest for that year. And I said, I'm missing some things. And what am I missing? And they said, well, that first thing they want to do, well, let's look at your soil test. Well, they had done the analytical work there at the university, and they said, well, everything, your pH looks good, this looks good, these levels look good. Maybe you could put more fertility out there. And that was what I found by going, researching that aspect and looking for help. And so I guess that's one of the things that kind of segued into starting this company, as we're wanting to provide to the farmer. When I say realistic, a more holistic approach, if you want to call that, and really working with nature, and that's our approach.
So, Phillip, would one of those problems that you were addressing was a lack of understanding? Am I hearing that right? I mean, you were trying to do better things, and you're seeking out people who know more than you. You're going to all the experts and other growers, universities, extension agents, all that stuff. You exhausted those resources.
Well, one of the things, Mike, that I've been blessed with is meeting some really, really great people in this industry, and that's allowed me to learn really. And one of the things I worked with Josh, I said, no one can take away your own experience. And I encourage farmers to do the work on their farms to find out. Guys will say, well, I have a ceiling. I'm not able to break through that ceiling. That's really why I went and sought out help, because I was seeing, yes, we're producing really good numbers and volumes, yet I'm seeing that crop is not reaching its potential. And so we started doing full-blown replicated research on that farm. And we did that for 4 years. I learned a lot there. I had an opportunity then to go do research for another company for 6 years, learned a tremendous amount there. And plus with the people I met and the relationships I developed during that time period. And you start opening areas in these crops that you say, okay, we can have an impact there. I think the industry's looking, and everybody wants to use the word silver bullet. I'm not going to say that, but we're looking for that one thing that we can do, that we move exponentially. And yet a lot of times we are not concerned about the small things. And I mean, I've been walking fields for years, and I'll just give you an example of last week. I was in a field, and they felt like they needed to go, and they never got the slot closed. And so that hurt them exponentially. So anything Genesis Ag would bring to them, we cannot cure that because they're the ones that inflicted that on that crop for that season. So, that's just those limiting factors that we put on as producers. We at Genesis Ag, we cannot help with those. We want to be helping with that crop to be growing naturally, doing what it's supposed to do, and how it's supposed to do that. So that's really kind of our approach.
I think that's a tremendous balance that producers have to try to walk all the time is get it done and get it done right. Sometimes those aren't able to happen at the same time, so you got to start making hard decisions, and that sometimes it comes back to bite you, sometimes it works out.
Right.
Are we sure it's not get it done fast?
Well, there's that too. Fast and done are not always, or they're pretty often synonymous.
Yeah.
And, so many guys nowadays are so spread so thin that, man, you just got to run.
Yeah.
Not walk. Definitely not crawl. Got to run.
Got to run.
And you guys probably deal with quite a few operators like that. I mean, guys that would be drawn to you are guys that are trying to push the envelope, trying to maximize their own resources, both of their time and their equipment and everything else. Any real stories about guys that are maybe spreading themselves too thin, or guys that have more slack in the slinky even?
Well, I guess as a general statement, we've got to farm more acres to increase profit. I feel like a lot of times guys could increase profit per acre on what they have, but we'll go out and pay $400, $500 land rent to farm another quarter section or section or something and devalue our profitability. So it's acres are king, yields king, all that comes into play. Really good friend of mine farms a little over 6,000 acres and has 4 planters. We got to get it done. So, it's really where it's at. And, the biggest thing is, well, hey, have you ever thought about this? And it's like, well, we don't want any more test plots. So then how, like my dad was saying, how do you get that next little bit to get you to the next level is, how do we get that integrated into the system? So,
and then if it's a little bit, how do we know that it did anything?
Right. Yeah, the biggest thing for us is like we've got a 50 cent per ounce product that guys might spend $2 and might be getting a 3-to-1, 5-to-1, even a 10-to-1 ROI on it. But if you're spending $2 and get 0.9 bushels of beans back on it, I don't think we see that that's over a 4-to-1 return. So, little things like that.
Right.
If the yield monitor can't find it, it didn't work.
Right. Yeah, and that is tough when a guy's trying to smash giant acres like that.
Yeah.
Got to really lean on that yield monitor, lean on technology to try to tell us whether what we're doing is working or not, when sometimes the yield monitor ain't fine enough resolution.
Right.
So along those lines, Josh, is there one sentence that you could sum up what your mission is with guys trying to help them?
That's a unique question. There's so many things we look at. Like from our perspective, we look at 17 beneficial elements that we actually have on a label that we put out through our different brands that we look at. And not a knock to the farmer, but we've got guys that might have only ever applied 5 or 6 of those. And there's so many little niches that we've got to be able to fill those voids for particular guys. And everybody's story is different. We've got 3 of us sitting here at the table, and we've all got 3 different stories. Every farm is different. And I think that's the biggest thing is how can we be attentive enough and, whether it be us going or someone else going and finding out what that next step on the ladder is to move guys forward. So I don't know if that directly answered what you were asking, but it's just so complex in the farming world right now that we may not know where our focus is at.
Well, and for you guys too, you're not a regional company. You guys cover the whole of the United States, so you're trying to help guys in every region that farming happens. I mean, you're working with the spinach growers, you're working with tree crops, you're working with row crops, you're working with livestock. For God's sake, that's a lot to have to know about and be good at, and broad areas that have different problems. So you're not trying to solve one problem.
Yeah, and the cool thing is we've got a diverse enough group of, either sales guys or dealers or whatever, is we've created some good nucleuses, and that has really allowed those guys to expand because they're close enough together to work together. But you take a dairy farmer in Pennsylvania or a rice farmer in Arkansas, those are two totally different crops. And then you bring in higher value crops like tobacco, for instance. We work a lot in tobacco that, totally different realms that nothing's going to work the same. The plant physiology is the same. The host biology is not the same. So all that are factors that go into all this.
Well, I've heard it said, and you've probably heard it said too, that a guy within 100 miles of home is an idiot. You got to be 200 miles away to be smart. So you guys are probably pretty smart if we're traveling as wide as you guys travel.
You got to get out of the area people know you, and you can kind of go in undercover, so to speak, Mike.
It definitely helps when people don't know all the screw ups you've had.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And speaking of screw ups, that's how you learn. I mean, one of the things that I encourage Josh is I said, don't be afraid to fail, because you're going to learn something from that. And we've had a very tough year here in this region, and I think we went 70 some days without rain. We had a little shower yesterday. In fact, you experienced when you came in, first rain we've had in 70 some odd days.
You're welcome. I won't even charge you for that.
I hear you. Thank you, Mike. And I've told people, I said, the worst thing that we could do as a farmer is to come through this and not gain any knowledge about, okay, how could I have circumvented some of the stress that this crop went through? What could I have done as a producer that could alleviated some of that stress on the crop? And I guess that's, if you ask me my mindset from now versus 20 years ago, it's working more with the crop and things that I was thinking, and I'll say this, that's been the hardest thing for me, is the things that I thought I knew to be rock solid 20 years ago in this industry, and now coming to learn that plant functions differently. That plant functions differently than when I thought, okay, we go out and we put on X amount of pounds of NP and K, we got our pH correct and all this kind of stuff. And that's how we grow a crop. And that was my mindset 20, 25 years ago. And the paradigm shift that I have come through personally during that time period has been astronomical, to say it's not all about pounds of a nutrient that you apply. It's not all that. It's about how that plant is functioning in the environment that we put it in. That's really the key, is helping that plant function in the environment that we put that seed in, or transplant, or whatever we're working with.
I heard you talk about stress. Would you say that if you had one catch-all term that would be the biggest limiting factor for growers, all the growers that you deal with all over the country, would you say stress would be the number one catch-all? Now, that stress could be water, it could be fertility, it could be compaction, who knows what it could be, but stress is generally the biggest limiting factor, and then identifying that stress?
Well, it's much like us. I'm under a lot of stress sitting here beside of you today, because this is something I'm not used to doing. I'm kind of kidding.
No, you're not.
So when I'm under stress, my performance actually goes down. When I'm under stress, my my thought pattern, everything that I do, it's somewhat is suppressed because of that stress. I tell everyone, I said, we want that plant to be functioning. And if it's functioning properly, it can fend off some stress periods. It can go through that, and we can get into this and get really deep in the weeds about how a plant functions and the quality of root exudates. I don't think that's talked about enough, is really what's in that root exudate that goes out there. And if that plant is under stress and it's not photosynthesizing, creating the sugars, everything it needs to send out those root exudates, well, that plant's going to slough off. And what our goal is at Genesis is to keep that plant functioning. We want to keep that plant going. We want to keep it moving, and we don't want it to stall, because this is true in animals. This is true in everything. When you get into that stall, and you know this from flying an airplane, when you get into that stall, you got to recover. And if you don't recover, then it's going to crash.
It takes a lot of energy to recover from it.
It sure does. It sure does. And the same thing with these plants. We want to keep that stress fended off as long as possible.
Gotcha. And is there a checklist, a flow chart that you follow for that? I mean, what's 1, 2, and 3 that you go down and see if you can address it?
You want to take that?
I guess identifying what causes stress. I guess we've been doing group meetings for feels like hundreds of years, but it's only been a little over 10 years. Everybody's first answer is weather. And for me, that's not controllable. I've got some really good friends of mine that have been super dry all year. They were too wet to plant, and they've been super dry since. And we can't control that. But if we know in a typical season, okay, typically around this time, this stress is going to happen. It's like if you or I typically get a cold in October, I feel like we would probably take some vitamin C at least once, probably not every day, just knowing us. But we would maybe do some prep to not get that sickness in October every time. And, in a farming world, it could be June or July. Okay, well, we typically get hot around the 4th of July.
Shocker.
What can we do to mitigate that? It's, so I think identifying what your stress is, and then what can you do to help overcome that. You're not going to fix it, but if you can have one less bad day, that's a big deal.
So weather would be one, and obviously very limited amount of control we have over that. Mm-hmm. So what would be in the flow chart? What would be the second most hierarchy or most powerful stress that you guys would look at, and what could you do about it?
I'm not sure if you want me to answer that one or not.
It's your podcast, not mine.
I know, but when you start talking about how much salt is in the fertilizer that we're using, and knowing that salt pulls moisture to itself, if we're pulling moisture out of the plant because we're doing something in a critical time, I would maybe think about that. Look at the forms you're applying, and again, if we get hot the 4th of July, typically we're just side dressing our nitrogen on our corn at that point, because nobody fertilizes beans. That's just a cover crop for the next corn crop. But look at when we side dress our nitrogen, what are we doing to mitigate the salt effect that is going on to that plant? Just one tidbit.
Gotcha. And that would be forms of fertilizer. That would be so processes that you're doing. That would be the next item in the flow chart. How can we mitigate processes?
Right.
All right. And that really, I could see that getting a guy a long ways through the season.
Right.
Not a whole lot going on after that.
Yeah. Even with my travels this year, and it typically happens every year, is you look at, we'll stick on corn because that.
Yeah, everybody grows corn.
Yeah. It's just corn. There's nothing else. As you look at getting a pretty decent sized ear around, because it may not have had a bad day early, but when you have a potential to set 50 plus kernels long and you only fill out high 30s to 40, what happened in that stress period? And we know when that time is typically for the length of the year to be determined throughout the season. And if we're creating a stress at that point, even though we think we're doing fertilizing for yield, maybe take a look at that.
So maybe fertilize less?
Fertilize more efficiently.
Fertilize efficiently. So efficiency.
That's a big one.
We like efficiency.
Some of us do.
Well, all your guys that are farming big acres with not a lot of people, not a lot of equipment, that's efficiency.
Right.
So having some sort of dovetailing philosophy to grow through things, I like that.
Yeah.
Be efficient with our time, be efficient with our equipment, be efficient with our fertilizer.
Right.
Yeah, that's all right. So to that efficiency, is there anything you care to give to the people? Phillip, Josh, either of you? Or is this got to call the super secret hotline?
I mean, the super secret hotline gives a lot of secrets away, but if we're going to give one tidbit away is, yeah, we're limited in what we can apply based on fertilizer, but putting something of high quality with that can mitigate some of those stresses, like some things that we offer in the Genesis portfolio, could be maybe a step for a guy that could mitigate some of that.
Without drastically changing what he's doing.
Correct.
Because there's nothing worse as an operator. A guy comes in and he's got all the answers for you, but to do what he's wanting, all you have to do is invest in a whole new line of equipment and do stuff that you've never done that doesn't fit what you're doing.
Right.
It's like, well, that's not a solution at all.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to be able to work with what a guy's got.
Yeah, and I think our whole team has the ability to do that. Yeah, we know critical timings, whatever that be throughout the season, even stuff pre-plant. But if we don't have the ability to do it on a particular farm, we have to adapt to that. And potentially that step be put in the playbook later on down the season. But, it's like watching a NFL football game. They don't call the same play every time.
I don't know.
Well, some teams do.
Yeah, I remember when the Patriots ran it, 400 times that one game or whatever.
Yeah.
Passed twice.
Yeah.
So it does happen.
Yeah. That is true.
And they won that game.
They did.
So
Well, it was working for them.
yeah. Why change it?
They were profitable. That's the thing,
Right.
They were profitable by doing that. They were gaining ground, so to speak.
And it got to the goal that they wanted, which was to win
Sure
the
did.
game.
Sure did.
They didn't have to win the whole season that time.
That's right.
Who'd have thought we'd have been talking about the whatever 2015 Patriots or whatever that was?
Yeah. That's been a minute. So.
Well, we kind of talked a little bit, Josh, about growing up with the man, with Phillip. But now Phillip isn't just farming. Phillip's got this company that he's trying to run. And you get to ride along with that and learn about that. And you're sitting here in this nice facility that Genesis Ag has. And what are some of the challenges you guys have faced, and what are some of the things that you're excited about in the next 12 months with this company that you can relate to growing the farm, being on the farm, all that stuff, crooked rows, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah, my grandpa used to say you could get more seed in a crooked row than you could a straight row.
For sure, yeah, it's
and
efficiency.
I remember him telling
Simple
a
math.
cotton farmer that in South Carolina, and the guy just looked at him. But I thought about it, and I was like, yeah, that's probably true. So yeah, navigating where we're going right now is definitely a challenge, and we've been in challenges. I guess it was about 10 years ago we faced some pretty similar challenges like this.
Markets were tight.
Markets were tight, inputs were extremely high, and I've had the privilege of working with several large farms that say we just can't pencil this anymore, and you go back and make a strategic plan on what you're going to do, and it may not be hitting a home run, but it gets you till tomorrow.
Right.
And I think as tight as things are, there's a fear of losing if we change our game plan, And I can't argue against a fourth generation farm that said, well, that's how dad did it. That's how grandpa did it. That's how great grandpa did it. But I think we're at the point now in ag that the next generation might not get the opportunity to see it. So looking at how can we change some strategies, how can we integrate some processes that can get the next generation on the farm and keep it successful is definitely where we need to look.
Maybe not just a home run, not just a single, but maybe just a foul ball to stay at bat.
Yeah, I mean, you're one of your greatest hitters ever that averaged over 300, hit more singles and doubles than anybody else. He wasn't known for home runs. And, you look at I had a guy tell me one time in a 7-year farming cycle, you lose money 3 years, you break even 3 years, and you make money 1. And if we just have a general conversation about a job outside of ag, how do you keep that job?
Yeah.
And
be a politician or a weatherman.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's something we need to think about. And how can we transition to 3 or 4 years of profit and 3 or 4 years of break even, because the market swing inputs are as high as we've ever seen them right now, and they don't look like they're going to come down. So how do we adapt to this?
What do you think is one of the driving factors for not commodity prices, but input prices being so high?
My gut reaction is farmers haven't stopped paying for it yet. Whenever farmers find an alternative to putting out a high dollar, I won't even say premium fertilized because we know it's not premium fertilized, but a high dollar fertilized, when they find that alternative, then the manufacturers aren't going to have anything. Their only option is going to be to come down on price. And I think that's the biggest thing is farmers need an alternative. Had lunch with a guy last week that, as long as I've known him, has put out his standard fertility plan for his farm averages X. He puts out X number of fertilized, and that's what he gets. And he said, yeah, I've already thought about it. I got to do something different, because his typical $225 fertilized budget is now $600.
Right. Didn't change the numbers on the applied pounds.
Yeah.
Just the dollars.
Just the dollars. And you go tripling your cost, and all of a sudden, wow, that hurts.
Yeah. Yeah. That digs into the pocketbook pretty hard.
Yeah.
When all of a sudden you get to pay for this hobby.
Yeah. And it's not these sales guys' fault that are out selling the fertilizer. And I'm not pointing a finger at anybody else, but we're not, big ag at least, is not giving the producer a chance to succeed today.
Man, one of the things that always bothered me was everyone knows what the margins are, and they know what you got to put into it. And it seems like everybody doesn't have a problem screwing that nut until it don't want to squeeze no more.
Yeah.
But that's maybe a little tinfoily.
Maybe a little bit.
I had a great product idea for tinfoil the other day. People talk about wearing tinfoil hats and stuff. I was like, man, that's for beginners. I chew that stuff. I need Tin Man flavored bubble gum. I think I could sell the Jesus out of that. So if you look 5 years ahead, what's going to matter more? Products, people, data, all those things, none of those things?
Well, unless AI takes over the world.
Which we know it will.
Yeah,
all the science fiction says so.
Yeah. Nobody wanted to believe back whenever, we won't call a name, but that guy traveled back in time and went after Sarah Connor. Nobody wants to believe that's going to come true, but who knows? But yeah, that's a tough one. Definitely people have got to be the one that is successful. And that's, I see so much of this that nobody cares about the farmer. They've got to get theirs. And then if there's anything left, the farmer gets it. If the farmer's not successful, you and I aren't going to be sitting here talking down the road. And I think that's where at least our focus is how can we help the farmer succeed, because that's how we're going to continue to be here and provide solutions and technologies that can keep getting them to the next step. At least my dad and myself, and the way we've tried to put our team together is the grower has to be successful. We don't have a quota that we've got to hit. We don't come out late season and say, well, I'll give you this at a discount just, yeah, it was $40 yesterday and it's $30 today just because I got to hit my number to keep my job. We're out there. If it doesn't make sense for the producer, we don't do it. And I feel like there's too much of that out there, and it really doesn't do the best service for the end user.
Yeah, it's a pretty short-sighted view of things.
Yeah.
When you treat the customer like a consumer instead of as a partner.
Yeah.
Phillip, do you have a different take? Or, I mean, I think knowing you as well as I do, I would think that people is probably your main focus more than data or products. But I know you're working on new stuff all the time. Maybe products is something that you know more than I do. And maybe you don't want to talk about it. Maybe you do. He winks suggestively.
So here's my take on this. Everybody wants to lead with a product when they come to your farm. I look at things from a farmer's perspective because I still, that's in my blood, and, it'll probably always be there. I hope it is. So, and I mean, I was on a farm last week and the guy asked a question and I said, well, here's my perspective. If this was my crop and I was looking at it, I said, this is my perspective on what I would do today. And they very seldom hear that from a perspective. And there's times that there's no need to spend any more money because you've already closed the door. And so when I say most people that come on farms, they're wanting to sell that product or they're wanting to sell that service, those type things. I like to work with the people. I like to develop that relationship with that person, and that's my focus. Is you get someone that is wanting you to be there. And when they see you pull in their driveway, they're not saying, oh no, there comes that guy. I want them to say, oh wow, there's the Genesis guy, whatever, and they're glad to see you, and because you're going to give them some type of benefit. So I'm more about the person. I'm more about that, and okay, and I say this every farm I go on. I will learn more being on that farm than I will ever bring to that person. I'm there, I'm looking, and I'm attempting to understand that crop and what's going on and how that farmer is doing things, because he's going to have a different twist. And so we don't have one cookie cutter that this one size fits all. And I think that makes us a little different. But I like the person, and I like working with that person and understanding that person. You're talking about how it's going to change. I think growers are looking for some help. We need some assistance. I feel like it's the farmers. I feel like it's us. We need to be the force in that transition. We need to be the determining factor in our outcome. And I really believe that. It's not that our government's going to save us, or it's not that some program's going to save us. We need to be that determining factor, and we need to go into growing a crop that the outcome, we're going to do the best we can do to get the top outcome, the most profitable outcome that we can get out of that crop. And I think it's really us as farmers that's going to really determine this transition.
Well, I'm terribly disappointed in that answer, Phillip. For a little peek behind the curtain, there's a jug, a little pallet of jugs out in the back here that's labeled weed suppressor with a circle and a line through it. And I've been trying to weasel on Phillip to tell me more about that, and he won't do it. So I was hoping to maybe peer pressure him into it. So if a guy called you tomorrow saying things are tight, where would you start trying to help him with solutions?
Again, it's like Josh alluded to a $2 per acre treatment. I think there's a lot of those, when I say in our arsenal or in our portfolio, we have these small impacts. Josh was talking about salt index in some of these fertilizers, and we have products that help mitigate that salt in some of these high salt fertilizers, and so it has less of an impact on the soil biology. Those are the type things that I would look at, Mike, walking onto someone's farm. We're sitting here in the end of September, latter part of September. What's corn on today's commodity market? What is it per bushel?
Man, I don't even know here local.
4.25, I think. So hovering might be a little higher than that now.
So it's just over 4. So if we've got guys that are in a negative basis, like I've heard of some negative basis in the Dakotas, that's astronomical. So we're going to be lucky to get $4 out of it. Now there's, if we're on the East Coast market and we got a positive basis, all that's great. So let's just talk. It's around $4. So if that doesn't change, and I've talked a lot about hope, and some of my presentations were based on hope, that we hope that it's better than it was last year.
Bill Clinton still believes in a place called hope.
Yeah, and it's like Josh was talking about. We're only going to make profit 1 out of 7 years, but we're hoping that we make it's better than it was last year. I'm already hearing that from producers that I've been on farms, especially since the 4th of July. Well, we hope that we'll get some rain to finish. And now the combines are running. Well, we hope that this market will change, or we're hoping that it won't be this rough next year. And so I'm just saying, how are we going to go into 26? And I've already told some people, I said I would put X number of units at nitrogen down at planting with a really good program in furrow or 2x2, whatever my planter's set up with. If you don't have either one of those, we do have a soils application program. And I said I would do a good, disease program and come back with a side dress program. And you may say, well, Phillip, you're sounding like you're only going to fertilize that crop for half. I think that's logical. I really do. I think it's logical that we only put half the fertility out there that we've been doing, because we've got a program that will support that.
Yeah, it doesn't matter where the pound of N comes from, just as long as it gets a pound of N.
Yeah. Let nature supply that for you.
Makes a lot of sense to me. If we can grow it ourselves, why truck it in and apply it and everything else? Sure makes a lot of sense. Is there any way to easily turn that key, or is this an ongoing process that guys would have to engage in? Or
I think I referred to that silver bullet earlier in our conversation, and,
yes, you did.
And that's what we want. And it's much like me losing weight. If I need to drop 25 pounds, I want to drop it in a week.
Just lose an arm.
Yeah.
I saw that in a mafia movie once.
I want to lose that in a week. I don't want the pain of a 6-month workout program and diet change. And I think that's American agriculture, is we want that shot that I can lose weight. I want that shot or that pill that makes me bulk up and have big muscles and those type things, or anti-wrinkle serum or whatever it is. I want that easy fix. I don't want to watch my diet. I don't want to exercise. I don't want to do these things that I need to do. And I think that's where we are in American agriculture. And it's not going to be a quick transition. It's one that we have to have a mindset for. And that's the people that we really enjoy working with. It's like Josh said, he had a producer that, hey, I'm going to have to change. I think we can really assist that person in that change and making that change.
So that's a good transition into, if you could lay out your philosophy for how a grower, if you had a blank slate grower that you could form into an ideal Genesis Ag poster boy, what would he look like? How would you get him there?
Well, first of all, you got to have green paint. That's the start. I know you were a case man, but
I saw that China reverse engineered the 670 now.
yeah, I saw that as well.
And it's not green.
No.
So you can have red and green.
And it has little bitty tires on it too. So, yeah. No, I think it's understanding what the abilities and opportunities are and where that producer's at today. I don't know that it's specifically a program. I think it's creating a synergy between myself or anybody on our team and that producer to say, okay, this is where the producer needs to be. How can we best provide the solutions for that producer to get there? If it's the producer saying, okay, $300 an acre profit is where my target's at, we sit there and break it down. Because we can't continue to do what we're doing year after year expecting a different result.
And would that be an achievable goal, do you think? $300? I mean, what if a guy comes to you with, I want to make $1,000 an acre on whatever?
Well, he's going to have to grow something besides corn.
So we'll have those tough conversations with.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be realistic. The thing that I've been doing since all this started is asking a strategic list of questions to best provide those solutions. And, I give them out here on the podcast, but then somebody else is just going to take them and do it themselves. Because it's always like my dad was saying, you ask the questions to the producer instead of being there to sell a product, then the next guy that pulls in the driveway sells the product. And, I keep some things close to the vest. Some guys that may listen to this will know what I'm talking about, but it's asking the right questions to be able to provide the best solution that we can provide. And is it perfect? Absolutely not.
Yeah, I think anyone who, if you'd have said yes, everyone would have called you bullshit on that and hung up on this podcast right away.
Yeah. I remember sitting in a meeting one time and they said, well, what would you put on every acre? And, we mentioned our biological food source. And, we don't believe in a product on every acre, yet they were selling fertilizer on every acre. So that always pops back into my head on stuff like that. But
well, the old joke, what do you put on every acre? Your shadow.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's kind of a hard thing for you guys. Your shadow gets stretched pretty thin sometimes.
Yeah, it's grinding sometimes.
But that's one nice thing about having a group of guys that you work with and trusted growers, trusted sales guys, stuff like that.
Sure.
Is there guys who you've learned more from than you've been able to help?
Well, probably the most educated people I've ever been around for agriculture didn't actually farm. Learned a lot from the late Hugh Lovell, who his concepts were not really streamlined American agriculture.
They were not mainstream,
but
not at all.
But I spent enough windshield time with him, asking questions, talking about things that, wow, that really makes sense. But, just immediately knee-jerk reaction with a farmer, it's like, oh, I don't know about that. But it's really tailored a lot to what my dad and I have done the last several years of how do we help a producer understanding nitrogen is not the most important nutrient for corn production. Yeah, because that's all we grow is corn.
Right, yeah. If you can't take what you learn from corn and apply it to everything else, then you're doing something wrong.
Right.
Obviously, ought to be a one-to-one transition to rutabaga or whatever the hell.
Yeah.
So tell me a story then about growers having pains and troubles trying to implement some of these philosophies and maybe not products, but just some of the concepts that you guys are trying to implement. So we've talked about learning from mistakes. Here's your chance.
Well, one of the first things that comes to my mind about an experience I had, Mike, was with a producer down in Georgia, and he was a vegetable farmer. and went on his farm, and the crop was already planted. So I said, okay, we're going to do some foliar work. And he said, well, we've attempted that before. And he said, we don't really know if it benefited us or not. So I said, well, how wide's your spray boom? And so we went into these vegetables and we sprayed what they called a panel. That was a sprayer width, skipped a sprayer width, sprayed one, skipped, sprayed one, and skipped. And I said, and here's the program that we need to put together for you. And so we did that, and he really got upset with me. What happened over a period of time is, of course, the harvesters got paid on the number of baskets that they picked, and he had difficulty getting them to go into the control area after about 3 weeks of our foliar program, because the foliar application was yielding so much higher. And we actually extended the harvest out for a longer period of time where we had foliar fed. So the guy was, and you don't want to talk about this, but the guy was almost on the verge of bankruptcy. And after he harvested and finished that crop, he came to me and he says, you saved us. So to hear something like that from a farmer, that really kind of let me know that I was on the right path and what I was doing. And that really, that kind of makes you feel good. It's like I said, when someone sees you coming down the driveway into their place, their farm, and they're glad to see you rather than saying, no, here that guy comes. And so that's really, I guess, one of my best experiences of things that really made me feel good.
All right. Well, I'll tell you one that'll make you feel bad then, because you deserve
that.
this. So I remember one of the first things I did with you guys was the seed treatment, and I did it on corn, and I was taking meticulous notes of everything. And we got the corn up, and my God, it was night and day difference. Everything was different between the treated and the untreated. And then we got a late freeze, had a May freeze come in there, and the corn that we treated was like 2 leaves ahead of the untreated stuff. Smoked it, turned it black. Now everything came back, everything's fine, whatever. Later in the season, you look at it and the stalk's girthier, everything's better on this plant, but being farther ahead hurt that plant. Even though it did what it was supposed to do, it hurt it. So if a guy would have just looked at the yield data at the end of it, not knowing why, it would have looked like your product hurt my product or hurt my yield at the end.
Right.
When that's not what happened. It ultimately is what happened, but there's more to it than that.
Right. And Mike, a herbicide application too, a wrong timing. We've all looked at ears of corn, and we see that going from 18 to 16 sometimes, or distorted rows. And I can ask the producer, okay, what happened here? Well, that's when we put our herbicide on, or that's when we did X, or that's when, and so I said, well, do you understand the impact? And they're not noticing that. And so there again, there's times that you can do something negative to that crop, and the freeze and us being farther advanced, dinged us more.
Right.
Because we were in ear development.
Right. Yeah, you'd never know if you didn't know.
Right.
Just look at the numbers. And I remember when yield data was first becoming a thing, I went to a class on that, and they put up a yield map on the thing, and they're like, what happened here? And there's a big old red stripe through the center of it, and people in dry areas are like, well, that's obviously a hill and it's dry, and people from the wet areas were like, that's obviously a low spot and it droughted out, whatever. And the guy's like, no, there's a fire went through here. And if you don't know, you don't know. Right. You got to have some context to help bring this data and make it have meaning.
Right.
Do you have anything like that, Josh, that you care to share, or would you rather just not think about that kind of stuff?
I don't like to think about that kind of stuff.
Never had no failures. No. Quite all right. So what distinguishes you guys if you're sitting there trying to talk to somebody about bugs in a jug and this and that, and everybody's heard the same spiels. What is it that sets you guys apart from Johnny Come Lately?
I think it's what we do for the soil. And I think too oftentimes farmers don't focus on farming the soil. It's all about that one season's crop. It's never about how can I get my soil in better condition. I remember one of the first times I went to a farm in Indiana, and took me some learning to understand this. I think that was said earlier, we'll learn more going to a farm than we'll ever take knowledge there. And I always ask the question, this was December, January maybe, is why is the water standing in the field? Oh, it's always done that. And then the dad in this operation made a comment to me several years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years after we'd been working there and some of our technology had been on that farm, that all of a sudden water's not standing on those farms. That wasn't our initial target to do that, but that started happening. And, you start evening out a yield map. I remember one of the first times I rode in a combine that had a yield monitor, and my dad said, just watch the yield monitor. And this was irrigated, so we'll take away the dry corners on it. But it never moved more than about 10 bushel going across the field. And I've seen yield monitor swings going across the field 100 bushel. And the things that we could do to make the soil more even and bring better characteristics to it. And then we start talking about better efficiency, higher yields, and all this. The thing about farmers is, hey, we want it today. We really needed it yesterday. You should have been here 2 days ago. It's never, well, okay, 1 + 1 is 2. That's where we're at, is when we get there and identify some challenges or, whatever the case may be, is being able to offer a short and a long-term aspect to that particular farm.
That yield monitor never moving 10 bushel, that reminds me of a friend of mine, a crop consultant. He talks about that when he was trying to instruct me on how to grow good corn. He said, ideally, what we're trying to do is make this field as uniform as possible all the way across it. We want a uniform seed bed. We want uniform planting depth. We want uniform emergence. We want uniform water and uniform fertilizer. And at the end, we should have uniform yield. And I'd never thought about that. It's like, well, yeah, if we're planting 30,000 seeds across the field blanket to reach its genetic potential, it should be X number of yield all the way across. I mean, if we know that we're maximizing that crop's production potential, it should be consistent, unless we're doing variable rate stuff. But I thought that was an interesting thing. So when a guy starts with you guys, then, Josh, on a project like this or down this road, is there anything that you guys do to help ease the transition in? Is there any sort of trial stuff you guys do, since we've been talking about trials? Any sort of small acreage stuff?
Yeah, definitely. Guys can look at trials on their own farm, because every farm's different. Every field that they farm is different. And here's a big one. Every row, 30-inch rows for corn, because, again, that's all we grow.
That's the only way they make planters.
Yeah, every row is different. And that's where trialing products becomes a big issue, because I was on a farm last Tuesday, and we just had a row unit that was not performing like the rest of them. Dramatically different ear sizes. You go to looking at things that we can't control within a system, is how does a guy know if it's working or not? So I think it's the education piece, it's the knowledge piece, the training piece, and then having a quality product to back it up at that point. And that gets integrated into those programs on those farms. And, I guess I'm fortunate for the most part of going to guys and being able to offer some of that knowledge piece. And then, I'm not necessarily a try it guy myself. If we're probably all the same way. If we want it, we just go get it kind of deal. So it's not, well, let me try a multivitamin on Monday and I'm not going to do it the rest of the week, because it's not really going to work for us at that point. But if we can integrate a technology into a system that provides benefit, I think that's where the answers are.
So integrating into a system. So lay out a couple of common scenarios like that, how you'd do it.
I guess it depends on what the interest level of the producer is. You know, we're working on something to kind of gauge what that could be. You know, is it beginner steps? Is it maybe an intermediate step? Is it a guy really wanting to transition his operation to something that maybe has a brighter future? I don't want to use sustainable because that word's been beat up and misused so much here in the last 10 years, but something that we can look forward to and have an understanding where we're going to go. And, you know, it could be something as simple as a program that we offer that could be less than $10 for a guy to get started and see big changes out of that. And, you know, price is always the deal in trying to integrate into a system, but it's something super simple like that.
All right, we're going to do a lightning round now. I'm going to swap back and forth between you guys. You get 30 seconds to answer. So one mistake you still see in pre-plant decisions. Phillip, go. You're on the clock. Come on, Phillip.
Well, I would say one mistake or that could be there in pre-plant decisions.
You're stalling, Phillip.
Yes,
Come on.
I am. No, realistically is making a firm decision and going on that and sticking to that and being committed to it. I think a lot of times people go into something and they're not committed. And so as far as a pre-plant decision, it's still a little helter-skelter. If you're going to go down a biological path, go it. If you're going to stick with straight fertility and that's the path you're going to stick with it. I mean, there's no going back and forth. If you go into the biological world, it's a firm commitment.
The commitment thing makes it, when you're wishy-washy, it's hard to know what works and what
That's
doesn't.
right.
At least this way, you know what worked and what doesn't.
That's right.
Got you. Josh, what's one in-season habit that separates high performers from the rest of us?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Thank you. I didn't write it.
I would say,
Now, you can't learn from him. You can't stall your way through this.
well, there are several things I want to say, and you're only giving me one shot. I would say how we treat the back end of the crop.
Okay.
We know that a tremendous amount of our fertility needs happens during the reproduction phase. Yet by the time it's knee high, as the old adage, we've got all of our fertilizer out there. So unless we've got a really biologically active soil or potentially a manure scenario or something along those lines, we run out of gas. It's like if we're in first place with one lap to go and we run out of gas halfway around, we end up in last. And I think too often guys don't finish the race.
Gotcha. Phillip, what's one place you can save money without sacrificing yield?
I think everybody is over applying nutrients.
All nutrients or just some? If you had to list them in rank order.
I'd say nitrogen is the number one over applied nutrient in the industry.
Why do you think that is?
Well, because we're out here and we're wanting to get phosphorus into that plant early. I mean, these guys are preaching it. We got to get phosphorus in. We got to get phosphorus in. Yet, this can only hold 16 ounces. And if we need 5 ounces of phosphorus in that 16 ounces, yet we have 12 ounces of nitrogen in that 16 ounces, we've only got room for 4. So we're actually limiting that plant from being able to uptake a key nutrient early in that cycle to form that ear size. And yet we're force feeding that plant to have a higher level of one nutrient in it. And so we're limiting the factor of getting that very important nutrient in that early plant.
So ratios.
Oh, yeah.
I think we went over our time on that one, so we're going to bounce over here. Josh, what's one thing that you would do this week if you had a farm Let's say in Bozeman, Montana, what would you be doing this week?
Probably hoping it didn't snow. Probably be cutting alfalfa for the last time.
All right. And what would you be doing thinking about next year?
Wondering when the snow's going to melt.
Phillip, if you had a 2,000 acre coffee plantation in Jamaica, what would you be doing this week?
I would be thinking about how I'm going to set that plantation up to be most productive in 2026. That would be what I would be thinking about, and what I'm going to do to that plantation in that area that's going to make me money in years to come.
All right. This is probably the most serious question I've asked you this week so far. Josh, if soybeans were to unionize and appeal for better treatment, what would their picket line chant be?
I don't know. It'd be something along the lines of a 5-bean pod.
Hey, hey, ho, ho, we won't grow.
Sure.
Man, you would suck at picketing, at striking.
Probably.
You need to have a better chant. You need to have some in your back pocket. Phillip, if turkeys could invent time travel, what historical blunder would they go back and fix? And you can't say Thanksgiving. All right, Josh, what crop would make the worst roommate?
Ooh. Probably Milo.
Yeah, that was mine too. Yeah, fuck Milo. All right, Phillip, we've all MacGyvered some fixes that we've done in a pinch that we're all proud of, but we would never tell anybody. What's one of yours?
Well, the old adage, baling twine. I was on a remote farm and I had a piece of electric fence wire happened to have it in the toolbox on the tractor. And believe it or not, I worked and got it resolved with that piece of electric fence wire.
That was vague enough to be believable.
Well, it's true.
Josh, picture drought as a bad house guest. What are some passive-aggressive hints you would give to make it leave? Or flooding, if it's too wet. I've never dealt with too wet, so.
Well, if we go with too dry, you just hold up a 1-iron, and then a thunderstorm's going to come and the lightning strike's going to be there. You just got to get out of the way before the lightning strike's going to happen.
All right. Like most things in life, it can be solved with a round of golf.
Yeah.
All right. So, Phillip, what's the most bless their heart question a city person has ever asked you about crop production?
I guess that one would be when you're talking, and I was talking to a group one time, and they said, well, don't the farmers don't they just go out there and harvest it and it grows every year there? So
Chocolate milk comes from brown cows.
Right. They just thought the crop just
happened.
Yeah, just grew back every year. You know, that was one of the best questions I guess ever had. They just thought it was, a perennial. It came back. I mean,
All you got to go do is sit in the combine.
Oh yeah, that's what they thought. It just come back every year. They didn't know you had to go out there and plant it.
Yeah, something about sweat of the brow usually.
Yeah, that was it.
All right, Josh, what farm critter would absolutely nail a TED Talk, and what would the subject be about?
Ooh. Probably a raccoon and radiators.
Yeah. About why they should be banned.
I've seen that. It happens at least twice a year that a guy goes to fire his combine up and there's the den of coons and the radiator.
And no radiator, no more, no fan.
It throws it all over the shop.
I had a brand new combine, and we don't have raccoons where I was farming, but we did have cats.
Oh.
And fired up the combine and couldn't hear nothing in the cab, of course. And all of a sudden, shut everything off for whatever reason, went back, and there's orange goo all over the side of the combine. You're like, what in the hell? And it was radiator fluid. And you're like, oh no, this is bad.
Yeah.
Cat got in there, blew up the fan, took out the radiator, had to overnight a radiator because, you know, you don't hurt something like that unless you're using it, right?
Yeah.
So we need the combine. So if squirrels formed a neighborhood watch, what's the first suspect they'd frame for crop theft or vandalism?
It'd be the crows.
The crows did it.
Yeah, the crows did it.
All right. If the combine and the grain cart were to get a divorce, what would the settlement look like, Josh?
Oh my.
Now, was that a oh my?
No, it wasn't.
That was a different oh my. All right.
It wasn't an oh my.
All right.
Probably the combine would end up with a Peterbilt and a old Wilson.
And the grain cart gets to pay for it all?
Yeah.
All right. All right. Well, guys, thanks for sitting down with me. It's been a lot of fun. I enjoyed hanging out with you guys. It's always good to spend time with you guys. I wish we could do it more often, but I'm glad to share it with you folks. Hopefully you got to know Phillip and Josh a little better, and look forward to working with them in the future.